Joining me now to discuss the Australian's editor-at-large and the country's most astute observer of politics, Paul Kelly. Paul, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Very good to be with you, Sharri.
Now, firstly, I want to ask you about how you think the Labor leadership is handling the very serious allegations that have been put forward this week in the wake of Kimberley Kitching's passing about her treatment by her senior Labor colleagues.
I would judge Anthony Albanese's response so far to be inappropriate. I think it distinctly lacks empathy, given the sensitive nature of this issue. Some of the things he said are plain wrong. In particular, the claim that the media is at fault. The implication being some of these stories shouldn't have been published. This is an extraordinary claim to make. Completely inappropriate, completely wrong. And finally, of course, given the campaign that Labor has waged against Scott Morrison for the last couple of years in terms of the treatment of women by Scott Morrison and the Liberal Party, I think the Labor leader has exposed himself to the charge of hypocrisy. There's no question about that.
Well, on that note of hypocrisy, we've seen many of Kimberley Kitching's supporters, Labor MPs, Labor senators, call for an inquiry. They're supporting some sort of independent inquiry into, firstly, how she was treated, and secondly, what happened when she did raise those bullying allegations with the Deputy Labor leader, Richard Marles. Anthony Albanese has been refusing to even consider the possibility of an inquiry. Do you think this is a misstep? Should he be addressing this by having some sort of investigation into what happened to her complaints and how they were handled by the Labor Party?
Well, the onus is certainly on Anthony Albanese as the Labor leader. I mean, these are serious accusations made by a number of people, made by Kimberley Kitching before she died. They've got to be taken seriously. They can't be ignored. They can't be swept under the carpet. We can't simply use the fact that we need to be very sensitive about these issues and can't address them, given her recent death. They must be addressed at some particular point. Now, I'm not being particularly prescriptive here and saying that Anthony Albanese needs to have an inquiry, although I'd point out that to a certain extent that was the standard Labor response when Scott Morrison was in difficulties on the treatment of women issues. Labor frequently called for inquiries, but certainly the onus is on Anthony Albanese as the Labor leader to respond in an effective and appropriate way and make it clear to people that he takes these concerns seriously. I mean, some of these concerns are coming from his own party. They're coming from sections of his own caucus. And we had the extraordinary situation the other day where Anthony Albanese was saying that the people being targeted here were Penny Wong, Kristina, Keneally and Katy Gallagher, implying that, well, the difficulty is that they're being targeted. I mean, again, this was an extraordinary and inept comment. The lack of empathy was extraordinary. So all I'm saying is that the onus is on the Labor leader to demonstrate that he is responding to this and taking this situation seriously.
We are 2 months out from a federal election at this point. Do you think this issue will have any implications during the campaign?
Well, that's a really difficult question to answer. Certainly, the issue took off last week. There's no doubt about that. And the media coverage, which you were a significant part of, was completely appropriate. And any suggestion that the media coverage was not appropriate or shouldn't have been conducted the way it was is not justified at all. Now, whether this issue continues into the campaign proper is hard to tell. I understand that the interests of the Labor Party, so close to the election, the interest of the leader, Anthony Albanese, is to try and shut this down as much as possible. but he's got to do a little bit better than the inept performance we've seen from him so far. My inclination would be to think that while this has got the potential to do some harm to the Labor leader, I doubt whether at the end of the day this is going to penetrate as a significant issue for mainstream voters.
You wonder whether he would have, when the revelations first surfaced, announced an inquiry or some sort of measure, you know, whether it would have played out as devastatingly as it has this week, culminating in that heartbreaking account by the HSU leader Diana Asmar in the Herald Sun, which really, this is one of Labor's own, this is a union leader, and her account of how this treatment impacted on her best friend, a woman she described as her sister, was absolutely distressing to read it, and would have been devastating as well for people to read.
Well, I think this is a devastating issue for the Labor Party. It's highly emotional. It's tied up with the death of a significant figure. There are all sorts of political and factional tensions involved, and we should be careful, I think, to not make any accusations or start claiming that individuals were responsible for her death.
Agreed.
That's not the issue here.
Exactly.
The issue here are the sustained claims that she was ostracised, that she was isolated, and that she was bullied by significant figures in the Labor Party and by the Senate leadership. Now, these are important and they are significant claims. The other point I'd make about the Labor leadership is that Anthony Albanese hasn't been under much pressure for the past 12 months. Now an issue has arisen where he is under significant pressure, and this is a test of him. This is a test of how he responds to pressure about a sensitive issue like this. And he's got to show an awareness of his leadership responsibilities. He's got to show that he can manage this politically, that he can show the appropriate degree of empathy. That's what's required here. To this point, he hasn't done that.